Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and today I'm going to do a little bit of a preview of this weekend for the LEC, just as a starting point for people to kind of start thinking about who they want to roster, why they want to roster them, some like potential outcomes that we could see, and the main things that I'm going to be doing here don't really have to do with statistics. It has a lot to do with game theory. It has a lot to do with the public perception of teams, as opposed to the talent level that I believe the team actually has. And for that reason, I'm going to be referencing my tier list that I've been kind of keeping up with. I think that there are really only two separate tiers of teams in the LEC, and there's movement within each tier. So first up, we have Mad Lions, G2, Rogue, and Fnatic. I think that if you played this season 10 times, these four teams are the most likely to end up in the top four and win a championship. I think that there are some teams in the bottom tier that had a chance to win the championship this split based off of talent, but for one reason or another, their form was absolute garbage, and it just didn't work out. So when I look at a matchup, it's basically going to be like, is the team in tier A or tier C? And the reason it's A and C is because I use this across leagues to kind of compare how I think the teams would match up theoretically. And then if two teams are within the same tier, we're going to take a look at the Vegas odds. And if the odds are way off, then we'll know that there's a potential leverage spot. But before we get much further, I just want to do a quick refresher on why I'm so skeptical about a lot of the statistics that players seem to use for League of Legends, specifically as it pertains to DraftKings. So on DraftKings, the goal is to have the highest scoring team possible. In best of ones, the team that gets the most kills on the slate is almost certainly going to have four players in the optimal lineup. And the reason that this happens is because DraftKings scores basically need players to get kills and assists. They have the bonuses for 10 kills and 10 assists. So you really want your four players coming from the team that scores the most points. So for example, if Mad Lions and G2 were playing tomorrow on Friday, and G2 got 24 kills, or had 24 kills in that match, and then Rogue and Fnatic played, the winning team had 16, then we had 14, 12, and 10, or something like that, then obviously G2 is going to be the most important team on the slate. They're probably going to be expensive because G2 is a very popular team. In a matchup against Mad Lions, you might see them as the second or third most expensive team as opposed to the first most expensive team. But you basically need to stack them with a team that fits in, most likely with 80 carries and a mid laner as your captain, because those are typically the players who get the most points. One of the great things about the LEC is that we have chances of getting a jungle or a top or a support as the winning captain, because there is so much more variance within one game. When we play a three game slate for the LPL LCK, the better team will end up winning more often, and it kind of locks in. It kind of reins in the expected range of outcomes. So you have most players that win games for 3-game sets. It's like 80 points. Is probably average, 80 to 90 points, and then you have some matchups where they go insane and they get 100, 120, like a player like Showmaker or something like that. But for the LEC specifically, we want to get access to that high upside kill score, and that's kind of what we're focused on. So the way that this ties back into the statistics is that there are people out there who will tell you, oh, well, this team averages this many kills and this many deaths. That number that they give you is going to not give you a good idea of what their matchup is going to look like against a specific team over a long set of games. And we can't lock ourselves into these averages that take games into consideration with fundamentally different champion pick bands. So I just don't think that there are many good statistics for League of Legends right now. And the way that I've kind of explained it, I've talked about this with Billy Von Eltz on my global rankings and EGOT rankings YouTube videos, which have a ton of good information in them if you want to check those out if you haven't already. But basically the way that I kind of made sense of it is when you go back to the beginning of Major League Baseball, the NFL, or the National Basketball Association, you had a sport that grew over time without a huge statistics, without a huge focus on statistics. It was more about like the spatial. I mean, I don't want to get too like into it, but it's more about like spacing. There was game theory involved, but like spatial awareness, trying to take advantage of enemy weaknesses. That's why that's why we hear so much about war analogies when we're talking about two teams competing against each other, because when those games were forming and the meta games were developing, the best comparisons they had were to things like war. Nowadays, we have some war illusions in esports, but we talk a lot about statistics and about the numbers of abilities, the numbers of cooldowns. So traditional sports were not numbers based. You have points, you have runs, you have goals, you have those kinds of things, but the numbers really weren't the driving factor in the beginning of those sports. So you didn't have things like yards per carry, yards after catch, yards after contact. We didn't have all of those in-depth statistics that really unlocked a lot of things for those traditional sports. Take the NBA, for example. Three-pointers were underutilized for, 20 years? And then once the statistics community got into it, it kind of exploded. Right now, in League of Legends, we have the opposite problem. League of Legends is so inundated with numbers that everyone gets distracted by numbers that they think matter, but actually have no impact on the eventual outcome of a game. Anybody can sit there and tell you, oh, well, this team has a good goal differential at the 10-minute mark or 15-minute mark, or is slightly above their expected goal at the 15-minute mark, or under the expected goals for 15 minutes for reasons X, Y, or Z. But in reality, all of these things that are associated with gold are so heavily correlated with winning and losing that you're not going to tell me anything really besides who won the match. Who has won previous matches. So if G2 goes 8-1 in a split, they're going to have most of the best statistics. That doesn't mean that they have performed better than they should have. It just means that they won a bunch of games. And I think for that reason, that's why I focus so much on talent specifically. So now that we have that kind of refresher explaining to you how I look at these things, let's get into some matchups. So like I said, this is before the salaries have been released, okay? So a lot of this is going to be speculative. But when you check the pricing and it comes out eventually, I think you'll be pretty surprised at how close I am. And the reason I'm so close is a lot of the reason why I'm close, or the main reason why I'm close, is because of the Vegas odds. DraftKings heavily depends on Vegas odds to figure out which team should be priced higher and which order the teams should be priced. So it takes those things into consideration, and then it also takes popularity into consideration. So we'll continue to go through that throughout the video. So first, we're going to take a look at the first day of games. I'm not going to do any speculation. I'm not going to do like a piece on who I think is going to make playoffs, but we're going to go through these individual matches and try to get an understanding if there's some value on either side, because the value that comes out of these Vegas lines is pretty highly correlated with the amount of ownership that they're going to have on the slate. So yeah, we're going to get into that now. So first up, we have Rogue against Vitality. If we're looking at our tier list, the simple thing to do is say Rogue is better than Vitality, because they're in two different tiers. So let's take a look at the money line. So that's 263 to 195. That means that Rogue is supposed to win this match between 70 to 75% of the time, and Vitality is going to win about 30% of the time. So we'll say 70-30. So at 70-30, they're one of the three biggest favorites on the slate. And there is a calculation that I do to try to get an idea of what the ownership might look like, but I'm not going to share that with you today. You need to get access to my sheet through Patreon and Discord. So yeah, let's just get into the matchup specifically. So we have Rogue against Vitality. So let's take a look at the standings. Rogue is tied for first place right now. Vitality is tied for 7th. Vitality still has a chance to make the playoffs, but I don't think they're a serious contender to win anything. So let's do Rogue and Vitality. So in the top lane, we have Finn against Cabochard. we have Inspired against Skeens, most likely, Larson against Milica, Vander against Comp, and Vander against Lebrov. So it's like the two bot lanes. Han Sama and Vander, I think, definitely have an advantage in the bot lane. Han Sama has been very impressive this split. Not in terms of, like, kills, although I'm pretty sure he's done very well in terms of kills. But when you watch the game and you see him make these aggressive plays, flashing forward to get a kill, when it's not necessarily clear that he should be able to win that duel, those are the kinds of things that I look for, because that doesn't only require you to be in a game state where it's like close to 50-50. It means the player has recognized that and has been able to convince themselves that they should go and risk dying for this play. There are a few times that it's happened throughout the split, and that's why I kind of just like Han Sama in general. So another thing that we can do is look at their recent results. I'm on Gamepedia, and Gamepedia is normally where I do most of my research, just because they do a really good job. So let's go to Week 7, and let's take a look at the most recent matches from Rogue and Vitality. So Vitality lost to G2 14-4. What does this tell me about Vitality? It tells me that they don't necessarily throw themselves at the enemy team when they're losing. So if we take a look at their team composition, Malphite, Set, Azir, Aphelios, and Thresh. So Vitality was looking to scale in this game, or at least spike within the mid game at like a 2-item spike. The problem with this kind of team composition is that it enables teams to keep saying to themselves, "Don't worry, we're gonna scale. We will be fine. Just give up this dragon, give up the next dragon, give up the tower, give up Baron, give up this, give up that." And then there's these gigantic goal deficits that happen, and the team just has no chance of winning. So if you look at the goal difference, it's a 15,000 goal difference. In my opinion, that's a bad sign for a team, because it means that instead of making a definitive play to try to get back into the game, they just continued giving away little chunk by little chunk, and ended up getting bled out. So some people might see that they only gave up 14 kills and think that it's a positive in a loss, but in my opinion, it's definitely a negative, especially in like a 28-minute game. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Rogue beat Fnatic 15-5, and this is something that we've seen pretty consistently from Rogue. They have been kind of middle of the road in terms of kills throughout the split, and I think that that's really just a spot that we can take advantage of in some matchups. Against Vitality, I'm not sure we're going to be able to take advantage of that. So my concern with Rogue is that they're going to be one of the 3 highest priced teams on the slate. Mad Lions against Misfits, G2 against SK. So they'll probably be the 3rd most expensive team on the slate this weekend. In order for them to fit into a winning lineup, they're going to have to be the top stack of the week. So there should be, or top stack of the day, and there should be 5 winning teams, right? So if the highest scoring team was completely random from only the winners, then they would have about a 20% chance randomly of being that top team. So the 20% chance is like kind of a starting place of where I would consider rostering these players in terms of like an overall ownership, because you do see a lot of people who mass multi-enter. You do see them getting a ton of different combinations that might seem like they don't have any chance to win, but what they're really doing is trying to get the upside of coming in first place with one of their lineups to pay off all of the other lineups that they entered into the contest, and then make a little bit of money, or a lot of bit of money, depending on the contest. So Rogue against Vitality, like I said, I think it'll probably be Rogue as the 3rd most expensive team on the slate. People who depend on the average kill totals and stuff like that are going to see Rogue, who does not get a ton of kills in their matches, but their average might look good because they have less deaths. So let me see. Let me find a Twitter picture that kind of explains that. So one of the guys that I look at is sports projections. I don't really use his charts as much as I used to. But I want to see what he had for last week from the LEC, because it'll be helpful. Okay, so total DraftKings points. by position in team wins. Schalke is, or Rogue, sorry. Rogue is kind of in the middle of the pack, and the fact that they're tied for first place and don't have a big lead in the kill differential is really, it's actually a bad sign. Some people might look at their number and be like, oh, that's pretty good. But when you're winning all these games consistently, for DraftKings, it just means that they don't have the same high upside that somebody like G2 or Mad Lions does, or at least that's the trap that you can kind of fall into. So I think that we should probably expect Rogue to go under-owned relative to their actual chances to beat the top stack, because G2 is an easy team to click on, Mad Lions is an easy team to click on, because we always see them have these gigantic wins with like over 20 kills. So even though they might lose more often, when they win, they typically win bigger. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So that's basically it for the first game of the week. Next up, we'll go to OG and XL. So OG against XL, it's basically a 50-50. That's what the sportsbook is telling us is 50-50. OG and XL are right next to each other in my tier list, and I think that Origin will probably still be the more expensive team on DraftKings, because there is more recent history with OG being considered a good team than XL. So last split, OG was a good macro team. They were able to carve out wins by playing the game slow, playing the map well. But this split, they've looked pretty horrible in my opinion. The change from Destiny to Jack Troll was supposed to fix some of their shot calling issues, but it didn't really have that tremendous of an impact overall, because it just hasn't so far. So maybe they're a little bit better at macro than they used to be, but there are other big issues with the team. So let's take a look at XL first. So we have Kryze, Cajal, Special, Patrick, and Torre. I think Special's okay. I think that Patrick's okay. I'm not a fan of Cajal at all. I think that Kryze has interesting upside as a top laner, not as an individual talent, but with the champion pool that he plays. So if we look at XL, you're going to see champions like Kale, Jax, and other carry champions. So I just go to the match history. Gangplank, Jax, Camille, Vlad, Quinn, Gangplank, Kale, Vlad. We just have a lot of carry champions, which we don't see from a lot of top laners. It also means that Kryze is pretty flexible in terms of his champion pool. Unfortunately, XL against Origin, we have Alfari on Origin, who is probably the best player, first or second best player on Origin, and one of the best top laners in Europe right now. And he has been for a while. So Alfari against Kryze, I think that I'd have to give the edge to Alfari, but it's probably closer and more volatile than most people would give it credit for, because the champion pool of Kryze is something you have to watch out for. In the jungle, Xerxes against Cajal. I think Xerxes is better long-term talent-wise, and I think that he has the higher upside. Xerxes was once thought of as a very good jungler in the LEC. They just haven't been playing well, and when you're not consistently winning, it's difficult to look good to most people. In the mid lane, we have Nuke Duck against Special. In this matchup, I actually do prefer Special. I think Nuke Duck is pretty horrible, and in a lot of the matches that I've watched, Nuke Duck's mistakes have led to his team's losses. When they played against, I think it was one of their games against Misfits. Was it Misfits? No, it was against Rogue. Origin against Rogue. He just looked completely lost, continuously missed Orianna ultimates, and was just completely horrible. There was a point last split where I was trying to take advantage of low ownership on Nuke Duck by stacking him with Origin as my captain just to be different, to create contrarian lineups. But I don't think it ever hit when I was doing that. Unlucky. In the bot lane, we have Upset and Jack Troll against Patrick and Torre. I think Upset is probably a little bit better than Patrick, but it's not significant enough to fundamentally change how I'm going to approach the game. So, again, it's supposed to be a 50-50. Origin is going to be the more expensive team, I would assume, which means that it's going to be tough to combine them with... Actually, it probably won't be difficult to combine them with the other favorites. So, Origin is the smallest... Oh, they're not even the favorite. I think Origin will probably be listed as the favorite on DraftKings. whichever team is the favorite in this match, this is really the important part. The favorite from this match will most likely be able to be stacked with other favorites, which is going to inflate their ownership a little bit. Because on DraftKings, typically you need to have a favorite with an underdog if you're going to play a mid laner and 80 carry as the captain, and do like a 4-3 stack or a 3-4 stack. But when you have a 50-50, because the implied win percentage is so low, they're kind of treated like an underdog. So I would expect these to be the 5th and 6th ranked teams on DraftKings, and for them to fit in with teams like G2, Mad Lions, and Rogue. So now we need to ask ourselves, what are the chances of this team of this game being the highest scoring on the slate? So Origin, in general, like I've mentioned in the past, has been thought of as a macro team, and I think that reputation has stuck with them into the playoffs, or into the summer split. If I'm right, and people are still thinking about Origin in that way, and that they're not as good as they used to be, they would probably be surprised to learn that Origin has had a lot of games where they've been one of the higher scoring teams on a slate. And looking at their points by position in team wins, Upset is someone who is particularly good in their wins. The one problem I would say, another problem that I would say with the DraftKings points by position in team wins, is that if you get one of these wild outcomes where a team gets like 25 to 30 kills, it's going to completely distort their points in wins by so much. So it's always important to kind of be skeptical about this kind of stuff. I think I've said that a few times at this point, but it's important to keep it in the front of your mind, because you don't want to get tricked by one of these graphs. So Origin or Excel as the favorite is as the primary stack. They'll probably not be very popular as a primary stack. If I was primary stacking OG, I'd probably go with Upset, because I like Upset exponentially more than I like Nuke Duck. So the question becomes, if Origin wins, how often are they the top stack? And if XL wins, how often are they the top stack on the slate? Let's go to the playoff implications of this. Origin and XL. So XL is ahead of them in the standings. I think most people would still agree that Origin is the more talented team. They've been a huge disappointment in this split. This is probably a spot where I would want to take one last stab at Origin for the split. So whether they're the 5th or 6th most expensive team on the slate, because of the stacking options, they're going to be pretty popular. I think people will have a much easier time picking Origin than XL on Friday. Let's go to the next match. So Fnatic against Schalke. Schalke has been on a 4-match win streak, I think. 192 to 148. That's basically 3-1 odds. I guess it's closer to 60-40. It's probably 65-35 or 65-35. Minus 200 plus 150. 67. So the VIG. So it's like 43 to 60. 44 to 66. 44 to 56? No. So you have to try to figure out where the VIG is attached on this one. I would say that people expect the book expects people to bet on Fnatic, so it's really 60-40. They're inflating it a little bit for Fnatic, but I don't think that's correct. I think that this should be really like a plus 200 for Schalke, and for Fnatic it's probably more like a minus 230. So there is some value here. I would consider betting on Fnatic. They are the better team. They have more talent. Last year, we saw Schalke do something similar at the end of the split, where they started winning a couple of matches. I won a few tournaments with Schalke at the end of last split, I think. And like I always say, like, I like Dylan Falco. I've talked to Dylan Falco about League of Legends before. Smart guy. I hate the fact they have a 10-man team. That's always going to be a knock against the team, in my opinion. And then we have Fnatic. So in the top lane, we have Aduamne against Bwipo. Bwipo is probably, in my opinion, the best top laner in Europe, or at least the one that I would want on my team for a bunch of Selfmade against Gilius. Selfmade is the better player. talent-wise. Gilius is on form right now, and Gilius is a carry jungler, which means that his games are necessarily more volatile than other players, and that is why I think that Schalke should be very afraid going into this match, because Fnatic has typically been a good team at pick ban, as long as they're not playing against G2. So I think that they'll probably focus on Gilius, get Gilius into a bad matchup, and be able to take care of Schalke pretty easily. I know that everyone has seen what Schalke's done recently and wants to think that they can beat Fnatic, but I will be limiting my exposure to Schalke pretty severely. Fnatic, in this spot specifically, I think should probably be the most expensive team on the slate, but they're not going to be. They're going to be third or fourth. Probably fourth. They'll probably be the fourth most expensive team on the slate, because Schalke is considered to be a team that's in form and like surging towards playoffs, but they need to have like a dream finish in order to actually make the playoffs. So I would say Fnatic's in a really good spot right now. And since Schalke needs to win all their matches, I would expect them to have even higher kill totals in games where they lose. Right now, they are not one of the biggest losers. I think a lot of that has to do with because they've lost so often that it kind of levels things out. Like, you get some of the huge kill scores and death scores in losses, but then you also have some really low ones just because of like variance and how the games have kind of played out. So I would expect Fnatic to be the fourth highest priced team on the slate, with very good chances of being the highest scoring team on the slate. So Fnatic is definitely somebody that I want access to on this slate. Let's go to the scoreboard. We can take a look at the last time that they played against one another. Fnatic. And like I said, this is all on Gamepedia if you want to take a look at something like this for yourself. So Fnatic against Schalke. So Schalke beat Fnatic. $15-1. This was in week 4. So let's see how the draft went. Gilius was on Lee Sin. If you give Gilius Lee Sin, I mean, it's just insane. Like, why would you even do something like that? He is kind of the most important player for the. He might be the most important player for Schalke because he needs to carry the early game and allow them to get into a spot in the mid game where they can contest dragons, fight over Rift Heralds, fight in these crazy Dragon and Rift Herald fights, and create a large enough lead where the game becomes easier for them in the late game. Because if we have a game that's like within 1,000 gold at the 20-minute mark, 25-minute mark, 30-minute mark, and Baron is on the table, then Fnatic is going to outplay them, I think. I would expect Fnatic probably to look for something like Cho'Gath. They've been really good when they've used Cho'Gath so far this split for the extra objective control that it gives you. So you have to ask yourself, do you think Schalke can beat Fnatic 2 times in the same split? Obviously it's possible, but I think it's very unlikely. So Fnatic so far is probably my favorite team on the slate. Let's go to the next game. Mad Lions against Misfits. Mad Lions is one of the most popular DraftKings teams because they continuously have high kill score games, because the teams that play against them always give them the option of just fighting. Like, teams always just are like, okay, fine, we're playing Mad Lions, I guess we have to fight a lot this game, which is pretty stupid. I don't think Misfits is going to fall for that, really. Misfits has been a more measured team, and they're trying to play the macro play style. I think it has a lot to do with Kabe being on the team, and it might not even be the best way to play for their roster, but that's how they're playing right now. So let's go lane by lane. So Arome against Dandan. I don't love Arome. He's the kind of player that I think is scoring pretty well and has good statistics because he's on a winning team. He's not the player that's creating these winning advantages for his team. The heart and soul of Mad Lions is Shadow. So Shadow is the player who's making most of these plays and allowing his team to get these gigantic leads. due in large part to his synergy with Humanoid. So I think this match really boils down to Shadow and Humanoid against Razork and Fabivin, and I think that is obviously Mad Lions favored. And if Razork and Fabivin try to contest the mid jungle throughout the game, they're going to have higher deaths. But I don't think they're actually going to do that. They're probably going to pick some kind of scaling team composition and fight for late game, because Misfits has consistently fought for late game. So let's look at the scoreboards from last week from these teams, because this is what's going to be the most the freshest information that people have. So Misfits beat SK 15-17. I think they should have actually lost that game if I remember correctly. Mad Lions beat Origin 17-9. Mad Lions lost to Vitality 21-8. That's not going to impact anybody's opinion of them really. And then we have Misfits losing to XL. And this was a bad loss. Misfits is really a much better team than their record suggests. They lost 2 games to Fnatic that they should have won this split, and they've had a couple other games that they just completely threw away. Like they had a match against Fnatic on the first week of the slate where if they actually finished through and won that game, I would have finished within like the top 10 in the first big contest coming back when the LEC was coming back for the summer split. So that was a heartbreaker and a tilter. So Misfits. I think if Misfits wins, they have a good chance of still underperforming relative to all of the other winners. The only way that Misfits... So Mad Lions is a good matchup for Misfits because Mad Lions are more likely to contest these objectives when they're losing, because Mad Lions knows that they're a pretty good team, or a very good team, in Europe. So I guess I do like Misfits if they win more than I would typically like Misfits if they win. So I'd probably bump my exposure of Misfits up a little bit. You'll still want to get the same amount of exposure to Mad Lions because they're always one of the teams that has a chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate. But this matchup specifically makes me more interested in having Misfits as my secondary stack and even my primary stack, which is not normal for Misfits. So the last game of the week, of the day, is G2 against SK. So G2, in my opinion, is the best team in Europe. We've got G2 at the top. And we've got SK as the first team in Tier C. I do like SK Gaming. I think that their roster is kind of interesting. Okay, so Wonder, Yonkos, Caps, Perks, and Mickey against Genax, Trick, Zazie, Crownshot, and Limit. Crownshot is overrated. Zazie's actually been pretty good this split. Genax has actually been noticeably good this split. Trick is past his prime, and they are like obsessed with picking set jungle, which I think is kind of a trap pick. It's so popular that and everybody does it that it looks good, but I really don't think it's as good. It's not. You can't really justify playing it as much as the European teams have really played it this split, I think. It takes away a lot of the playmaking ability from your jungler. Like it doesn't take away the playmaking ability. It changes the kinds of plays that your jungler can make. A lot of the time, it results in them sacrificing their life to contest an objective, which makes it difficult to secure the objective afterwards. So, best case scenario is like Trick goes in on set, dies, stops the other team from taking a Baron, but then you can't take the Baron either, and then you have to reset. So I think G2, I hope they're back in form. I like G2. I like watching G2. I want them to be the best team in Europe. I want them to compete in playoffs and be very good. So maybe I'm being a little biased. Right now they're both 8 and 7. I don't think anybody is convinced or tricked, I should say, by the standings or the records. Everyone thinks that G2 is a better team. I would be comfortable with having exposure to SK because when G2 loses, they lose big. So that's probably the best argument I have for playing SK Gaming tomorrow. let's take a look at the scoreboards. So SK had 17 kills in a loss against Misfits. G2 beat Vitality 14-4. SK Gaming beat Rogue 4-7. Oh my god. What a tilting game. And then G2 beat Fnatic 25-9. So G2, if you're going to mass multi-enter, or at least run multiple lineups, you'll most likely need to get G2 into your lineup, into your exposures, because they're at least 20% to be the highest scoring team on the slate. So that's a pretty basic first look before the salaries were released. And like I said, it's pretty easy to know where these teams are going to be priced based off of the popularity of all these different teams and the Vegas odds. So let's try to predict it. Let's try to predict it real quick. So let's see. I'm going to pull this over here, and we'll do this. Okay. So I think that Origin is going to be the 5th most expensive team on the slate. XL will be the 6th most expensive team on the slate. Fnatic will be the 4th most expensive team on the slate. They'll either be 3rd or 4th. It depends on how much DraftKings weighs the popularity, because they are a very popular team. Schalke should be 7th because they've been trending in the right direction. I think it's a trap, but they have been trending in the right direction. I can't deny that. G2 will probably be the most expensive team because they've been the most expensive team often this split, even when they were consistently losing games. That means SK will be 10th. Mad Lions, I could see Mad Lions as 2nd. Kind of looks like a 7. Misfits is 9th. Vitality is 8th. And Rogue is 3rd. I could see these two being swapped around, but that's basically it. So that's it for the first day before the lineups and salaries are released. That's all I've got for you today. But once I see the DraftKings salaries, things will probably change for me a little bit if I'm wrong. I don't expect to be wrong. And then come back to the channel tomorrow. I'll have another similar video for the second day of the weekend and the 3rd day of the weekend. So because of the fact that it's the final week of the season, they have 3 days of games, and it's always important to kind of keep in mind which direction teams are going during the weekend, because that's what the fans and the public sentiment kind of follow the closest. So I guess that means potential spots that'll be interesting exist. But I'll save that for another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.